Christopher Nolan is one of the all-time great directors and just released his 13th film, The Odyssey, and this guy's filmography is so good that it is insanely hard to rank, but I'm going to attempt to do that today. So let's stop and rank all 13 Christopher Nolan films from the worst to the best. What's up everybody, welcome to the channel. I am Nick and today we're going to be ranking all 13 Christopher Nolan films from the worst to the best. Now rewatching all of Christopher Nolan's movies up to The Odyssey, I really have to say there is not one Christopher Nolan movie that I actively dislike. There's a couple here and there that I think are average or good enough at best, but Christopher Nolan's filmography is truly an all-time resume for we are genuinely witnessing greatness right in front of our eyes, and really with that said, let's just get right into the ranking. In last place, we have Following, the $6,000 movie that started it all, the movie where Christopher Nolan did extensive rehearsal because of limited time to schedule film shoots and everything, and then film on the weekends throughout a year to get this movie filmed. The story behind this one is really interesting, and the novelty of watching Christopher Nolan's first film, it is really what carries the viewing experience on this one for me. The Nolanisms are very clearly forming here. You have a non-linear approach, and just the way the characters are interacting feel very Nolan, and you have the neo-noir feel in here as well. But beyond all of that, the story really does only scratch the surface for me of being interesting, and that's mainly because outside of the non-linear approach, the story is a little too simple for its own good, which that's not inherently a bad thing, where I do think the concept is very interesting, where you have this loner who's just obsessed with following people, and him following people ends up getting him in a dangerous game with a malicious counterpart in this one. But I don't think the characters are building enough intrigue to make this movie reach the full potential that it has, and despite being a little over an hour, I do think this one is a bit slower moving than a bunch of other Nolan movies, even the 3-hour ones, and removing the fun of this one being Christopher Nolan's debut film, there isn't much here that does leave an impact. And when you're watching this, are you going into this movie to watch Following, or are you going into this one to watch Christopher Nolan's debut film? And that's not a knock on this film inherently there, I'm saying inherently way too many times, but are you watching this for Christopher Nolan's debut, or are you watching Following as a movie itself when you're rewatching it? And I do think this is a well-constructed movie, especially for a debut with the materials it has, but comparing it to the rest of Christopher Nolan's filmography, it's not really fair. But Following, I would definitely give this one a chance. Then in 12th place, we have Dunkirk, a movie that I find exceptionally well made, but it is one of the harder ones to get invested in. Nolan surrounds this movie inside of the event of the Battle of Dunkirk and the rescue mission of these 400,000 men. And I really do like the immersion here. I think Christopher Nolan does an amazing job here, putting you in the forefront of everything going on, whether it's in the sea, whether it's in the air, whether it's on the ground. He really does bring you in and just create this thrilling atmosphere of this whole situation that happened in World War II. And I truly think this is a complete bragging right for Christopher Nolan as in a filmmaking technical aspect here, because the sound design is just incredible here. All the gunshots, all of the aircraft, all of this movie just sounds so clear and everything, and the visuals too are just amazing, especially that scene on the beach where he's ducking down from all the shots coming. That shot is amazing and just everything with it. However, I do have a problem with being immersed in the story, where the atmosphere totally brings you in, and there are so many great moments here and there, but none of the characters are remotely as interesting as some of Nolan's other characters, where I only remember one character in this movie by name, and that is only because Harry Styles played him. Now, everything about this movie is a very well-made one, but as a story and everything, it doesn't invest me in the same way that some of his other films do. Then in 11th, we have Insomnia. Now this is one where I like a lot about it, but it has never really invested me in the same way as other ones do, and that is a phrase that I've just said 3 movies in a row. I need to be more original here. But the performances are really what make this film work as well as it does for me. Al Pacino here just does a fantastic job where he's going into the psyche of this troubled cop named Will Dormer, where he's just having this descent into madness arc where he's getting a lack of sleep while also being manipulated by Robin Williams, just freak character here. And I think Al Pacino does a great job portraying the troubled mind of this cop, and the chemistry, or reverse chemistry, whatever you want to call it here, with Robin Williams was amazing, where Robin Williams is playing one of his most quietly menacing roles he has ever done. He is just this manipulative, just I'll use freak again, manipulative creep over here, and just the way he is going into Pacino's mind there. I think the dynamics between those two are really well explored. And fun fact about this one, this is the only script that Christopher Nolan did not write like at all for a movie that he directed, and his directing style still very much shines through, and I do think the script has a lot of good dialogue. One thing I do think that does knock it down a bit for me though is that the script is very much focused in being in the mental state of Pacino's character and having this slow ride into him like just going crazy, and I like how they go about that in like in a theoretical way of let's do a slow ride to show how weird his mind is going, but I do think that does affect the pacing at certain points, where at times it feels a bit slow, and it is a remake of a 90s film and adds a half hour to it, so maybe that could also be part of it, but not inherently an issue there. But Insomnia, I do think is a really good thriller, and I think it is an underrated thrill from the 2000s for all those thrillers, and also just in Christopher Nolan's filmography. In 10th place, we have Tenet, the boldest exploration of time in Christopher Nolan's filmography, but it is a bit weak in the execution as a whole. Now, there are a lot of great ideas thrown into Tenet, and there's just a lot of really cool things, but the package that it's in can sometimes be a little more confusing than cool, where I do think the story often suffers from the dialogue in this one being told like we already know what is happening, because they're just throwing so much at us, and grasping all these concepts can be a bit insane and a little hard to do, because the way it's describing it doesn't, like, the way Inception is able to explain all of its concepts clearly, but also not just spelling it out. Tenet doesn't spell it out, but it isn't really audience friendly at some points either, where it takes way too many times to watch it to understand it, which rewatching a movie to pick up certain details is one thing, but having to rewatch it to understand it completely is a completely other thing. And I do think the characters are a bit relatively weak with little emotional investment in them, and I do think it is the performances that really much carry them, where I think John David Washington, Elizabeth Debicki, and Robert Pattinson are really the three that make these characters interesting rather than the writing itself. But I do think the movie's saving grace here is just how much fun the action is and the spectacle that we have. That opening concert hall raid is fantastic, and I really loved like the whole airplane crash scene and the final battle where you have the building, like the visuals, just having that building completely just crumble and then it rebuilds and everything with time reversal and everything. I think the final battle is extremely creative and just looks amazing. So there's so much about Tenet I love, and it's extremely entertaining. I just wish I could like it as much as some of the other ones because of how cool this idea is. It just falls a little flat in the execution. Now, I do have a slight personal connection with Tenet because it was the first movie back into theaters during COVID, and I was able to see it on my last day of that summer break before remote learning, like school year and everything. There's a slight personal connection with Tenet and the obsession that I ran with it for that year and everything, but rewatching it now, I can definitely see the issues that this movie has. Then in 9th, we have The Dark Knight Rises. Now, this is one where I've always had a bit of a complicated relationship with it. My liking of this movie is always kind of varied, like, oh, I really like it, I don't really like it, I really like it. And the past rewatches, I have been consistently in that realm of it is undoubtedly a messy story that is trying to do way too much at times, but I do really enjoy this one as a whole. And I do think the villains in this one can be pretty half-baked, especially Talia al Ghul, who I think needed more exploration to fully work. I very much like the idea of using her to kind of be the grand, like, mastermind and conclusion to the trilogy, but I think there needed to be more to her to really stick the landing on that. However, I do love where this movie picks up, where we have a grief-stricken Bruce Wayne after the events of the last film with Rachel and Harvey and the guilt that he's having with everything. So I really like where we pick up Bruce Wayne and a lot of the questions that we have of like following his new path of, does he continue being Batman? Is that what he thinks everyone needs, but is it really what he needs? And does he maybe need a fresh start instead? So I really like the internal questioning that we have with Bruce Wayne in this movie, which I think does bring us to a very good ending. And even though I do think the main story is definitely way too convoluted at a lot of points, it's still a very good, like, I think the character work does make this a good conclusion, and the action, of course, it's the Dark Knight trilogy. The action is on another level, especially all the Batmobile stuff they do in this one. But I do have one question. Why is Hines Ward returning kicks for the Gotham Rogues? Dude is way too good to be doing that.
There's a man open. Touchdown, Pittsburgh! Hines Ward! The Steelers score from 43 up on a gadget play that they worked on in practice on Friday.
Now, going into this top 8 here, all of these movies are so good that any arrangement of this top 8, I think, can be correct. And just that shows the skill that Christopher Nolan has. So don't be offended if one of your favorite ones is like 6th or 8th or whatever here. But this is just my list. It's not the right one, but it is kind of objectively correct if you know what I mean here. In 8th place, we have The Prestige, a magic story that is told like an illusion itself. Christopher Nolan takes the non-linear formula that he does so well with and crafts it exactly as a magic trick would go, where you have that opening setup where you have Michael Caine giving the 3 steps or the 3 acts to a successful magic trick, and this movie really just acts like that. And of course, every movie has a 3-act structure. You're doing parallels there, but I love just the way the movie is set up to be exactly as a magic trick would go to make The Prestige in its 3rd act just work extremely well. And Christopher Nolan and Hugh Jackman's performances are really what make this one work as well as it does, and it very much like runs on how well these two are able to craft this rivalry and how well you can tell what the sabotage is there between them. And the story also depends on how much you just feel the utter hatred of these two characters, and you absolutely feel that in every single scene. And the determination to fumble each other's performances and get back at each other, creating new ways to do that, I think the movie does extremely well. It's very creative at coming up with these ideas. And the structure is able to make that ending feel like you have been completely deceived because the twists are done so well, and I think the nonlinear approach is really what makes those twists stick the landing as much as they do, even more so. And really the only thing that holds this movie back for me is just more personal enjoyment. It's never been one that I've enjoyed at the same level as the other Nolan films. I fully respect it. I know exactly why this movie works and like just works so well for so many people and why it's so beloved. I totally get it, but it's just one of those where I respect it a little more than I enjoy it, but I very much enjoy The Prestige. Then in 7th, we have Batman Begins, the film that starts off the greatest comic book trilogy of all time. Here, Christopher Nolan takes a genre that at the time was mainly known for its campiness and its upbeat tempos and makes a very gritty crime story begging for its dark tone.
Somebody get these beggars out of here!
Where you get a massive criminal plot, you have a broken justice system, and some awesome scarecrow nightmares that really make this one feel so distinct. The focus on Bruce Wayne, though, is what I thought really makes this such a good origin story, which, duh, focusing on your lead character is what makes an origin story good.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Where on one side you have the charismatic businessman that can talk himself in and out of any situation that he is put in. Then you have the other side where you have this rage-fueled, grief-stricken man on a mission to defend Gotham, where he's struggling with the death of his parents still and just everything bad that has happened to him. And I like how he's just navigating that and where we're trying to go with how Batman is kind of his way to kind of as a therapy in a sense. And when you have the villains just perfectly antagonizing every aspect that I just mentioned, you have a great new formation of identity under Batman, where you have Bruce having that as a new coping mechanism. And the first hour of this movie I do think can be a bit jumbled, where it's trying to set up so much where it can feel a little bit convoluted at times. But when I think this movie gets going, we really get going on a really fantastic start to the Dark Knight trilogy. Then in 6th place, we have Interstellar, where this time Christopher Nolan looks at time, a concept that he is very familiar with, and he doesn't just make it cool, he makes it sad. And this is by far one of the most emotional films, and really just the most emotional film that Christopher Nolan has made, where you have the passage of time on Earth not following Cooper's journey, so him having to watch all of his kids grow up while he is staying the same age is a devastating thing to watch, and I think Christopher Nolan very much just hammers that in really well. And Matthew McConaughey's performance and Jessica Chastain, I think, really just work on that. And that Cooper and Murph, just the dynamic between those two is the clear emotional backbone, and you feel it in every single scene. Now, I do think that the script can be a bit exposition heavy at some chunks of it, which I do think can hurt the pacing for me a bit, and I do think the catalyst to get into the big ending is a little silly when you really think about it, but none of that is to knock how much I love watching Interstellar. I love the visuals in this one. I think Hans Zimmer gives his career best film score in this movie and is debatably a top 10, top 5 film score of all time, just the work he does on this one. So Interstellar is a movie that has my full respect and full enjoyment. I love watching Interstellar. Then in 5th place, we have Oppenheimer, the movie that finally earned Christopher Nolan his long-awaited Oscars, Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Cillian Murphy. So many awards for this one, and it deserves all of them. In this one, Christopher Nolan perfectly constructs a biopic that has so much more than this is Oppenheimer and this was his life. A thing that we have just hated about biopics, like that Springsteen one and like all these other ones where it's just like, what are we doing? It's the same formula for everyone. And this one, Christopher Nolan is like, what formula are we doing here? Like, the non-linear format on this one is amazing here, and I love just the way it's constructed and just the absolute horrors of war and the creation of the atomic bomb. I think is done in such a devastating way, where if Interstellar is one of his most emotional films, Oppenheimer is right next to it. And I think all of the visual tricks that they throw in this one to show how much Oppenheimer's mind was spiraling throughout this whole thing, and just the complexity in his character at the same time. Like when he steps into the rubble when he's doing his little presentation, his like rousing speech, or the ripples in the water at the beginning of the film, to contrast that with the ripples of bombs going everywhere. I think the imagery is incredible in this one. I want to specifically mention the test scene for the bomb, and I really do think this is arguably Christopher Nolan's best scene that he has made, where we have that big build up to the bomb and then we're ready for that explosion, but nothing goes off. It is silent. We're just watching the reactions of everybody watch the bomb explode, and then that delayed explosion I think hits harder than just showing it immediately. And just the way that wraps up the tension and just the heightened emotion of, we just made the atomic bomb. I really think that scene is just one of Christopher Nolan's best scenes. On my copy of Oppenheimer, the review tag at the bottom is like one of the greatest films of the 21st century. I agree with that. I think this is one of those movies that where the message was relevant in 1945-6 when this movie took place to 2026, this movie will constantly stay relevant for as long as war is a thing. So Oppenheimer, to me, is just one of those generational films that we rarely come by. Then in fourth place, we have the Odyssey. Now I'm going to do my best to not throw hyperbole around on this one, and that was my intent when I was writing my notes for the Odyssey and everything, how no hyperbole and trying to remove as much recency bias as I can with this. But I truly have to say, I have nonstop been thinking about how much I have loved the Odyssey since I saw it, and I truly believe this is one of the grandest and most epic films we have received in the 2020s. The richness in the filmmaking that Nolan brings makes just this massive scope and depth in the story work so well, where you have unbelievably great and massive set pieces from the Cyclops, which was just all practical, which is just so impressive to see the behind the scenes on that one. You have Cersei's scene, which just feels straight out of a horror movie, and then the whole final battle of Odysseus versus the suitors. On top of that, this extremely captivating story of Odysseus trying to get home. I also really love the arc that we get for Telemachus as well, and I honestly really liked Tom Holland's performance in this movie, where, to defend Tom Holland here, he's the most reserved role in a room full of just intense emotion, and he's also the least like fully formed yet, where he hasn't really had that coming of age yet, so he's a bit timid and reserved, and I think Tom Holland absolutely nails that. And when you get to the end of the movie, the rise in tone and just the aggression that he brings, and just the more formed as a person Telemachus is, I think Tom Holland nails all of that. And what he does with the eyes, I think is really well. Just the amount of control in his performance, I really enjoyed. But getting on to some more like locks for Oscars and everything, Matt Damon and Hathaway and Robert Pattinson, I think all gave among their career best performances. But if we're gonna talk about a career best performance, John Leguizamo truly gave the best performance of his career in this movie. Now there is so much to process about the Odyssey that only one watch, I think, doesn't do it justice to put it among the ranking of everything else that I've seen multiple times, but a rewatch will pretty much just solidify my thoughts on this one. I love the Odyssey, so much to process, and I want to watch it so bad again, but only from the first viewing, I can only put it at 4. Above Oppenheimer was a little bit of a stretch for me, but I have to do it here. Just my entertainment was a bit higher in this one. Before we get into the final 3, make sure to subscribe to this channel if you are enjoying this video to get some more rankings and reviews and just any movie content in general. And like this video if we haven't gotten to your favorite Christopher Nolan film yet, or just like it in general, because I think this video is good. I hope it's good. In third place, we have Memento, one of the best constructed stories that I have seen. Just the meticulousness of the nonlinear timeline as it's gradually revealing new details of Leonard's interactions, where every scene is just subverting your expectations, where just the way this movie's presented, where we have this reverse timeline where we see like kind of the end of one thing going on, and then all we had to judge is what happens in that specific moment. Then we get to see a little bit before that, and we're starting to question what happened in that scene. Then we see a little bit before that, which makes you question everything you've seen before. I just think the way that this movie is crafted is just so unbelievably well done, especially for someone's second film in just their filmography. It's truly just mind-boggling how well Christopher Nolan is able to craft this one, where we're constantly questioning who do we trust in this movie. And even when the movie's done, the tricks that this movie plays, you are still being gaslit when this movie is done of, can you really trust what was just said? And even when the movie's done, you're just questioning, like, is the end of the movie even correct? Where you know it is, but you're still questioning everything in a very good way, because the movie just manipulates you so well. And even when you're rewatching the movie, you're still picking up on all these new references and little details where it just makes the movie infinitely rewatchable. And just, it's so hard for me to even comprehend how much I love the way Memento is crafted. Like, this is just one of the most interesting stories that I've seen put to screen. I just love Memento so much for all of these reasons, and is just one of the most manipulative and deceptive stories with absolute ease. I love watching Memento. It is just undeniably a top 3 Christopher Nolan film for me. Then in second place, we have Inception, one of the coolest and most mind-bending espionage films that I have ever seen. Just the idea of going into people's minds and stealing information or planting it is cool on its own, but just taking it a step further to what Christopher Nolan does, adding all these layers and just the logic of dream structure, I think is done so well. And just these action set pieces we have in all of the minds, like especially the first one we get where like the rooms are crashing down while like Leonardo DiCaprio is just trying to escape with the information. I just love every action piece in this movie. I like the sledding part at the end, and like unbelievable what is happening here. But just the complexity of Cobb's own mind, where Maul as a villain is very interesting because it's not actually her, it's just the projection of his own guilt of the whole situation that happened with her, and it's just the manifestation of that part of his mind. I think it's just a really clever villain to sabotage him in all of these missions. But on top of all of that, as I said before, the action is just so much fun, where the story is really creative and clever, throwing all these paradoxes in here as well. Just the creativity of the story is enough to make this movie just one of his greatest, but the entertainment value and the action and just how fun everything about this movie is, I love watching Inception every single time. It is an absolute treat to watch this movie whenever you get to. But in first place, we have The Dark Knight, and this is what I consider to be the greatest live-action comic book film of all time, and you can even debate it is better than the Spider-Verse movies. It arguably is, but it's always funny looking back at Heath Ledger's casting and how the negative reaction to that announcement was so overwhelming, and then he turns around and gives, you know, the greatest comic book villain performance of all time, and like one of the top 5 villain performances just across cinema. But like I said with Batman Begins, this movie does what any good movie does with the villains, where they're perfectly antagonizing the right aspects of not just Batman, but Bruce Wayne, where Joker is pushing into that doubt that Bruce Wayne has of, should I even continue being Batman? Joker is very much pushing that. And Harvey Dent as Two-Face is pushing his perception of like goodness in people and what Gotham really needs. So I just love how those two are perfectly encapsulating everything that is troubling Bruce Wayne internally. And just the way that's crafted just makes me so like excited thinking about it. And all of the philosophical foreshadowing is just a really great touch in here as well, where like Joker just decided to become a 21st century philosopher. But of course we all know the line from Harvey Dent,
"You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain."
Just expert foreshadowing there, even if it was obviously a bit obvious knowing Harvey Dent is Two-Face, but it's just so fun in my opinion, everything that Nolan throws in here. But on an action front, we get some of the best comic book movie villain we get, where I think the Batmobile action is just at another level in this one, where you have the truck flipping over, hit everything, just unbelievable. And just it takes everything that was so good about Batman Begins and just elevates it to make it even better, where I can't imagine if you're walking out of the theater in 2005 from Batman Begins and you're like, holy crap, this movie was awesome, and then someone tells you, yeah, it's literally only going to get better from here, and then The Dark Knight Rises happens. Dark Knight is just so unbelievably rewatchable. I need to find more words than unbelievably, inherently, and craft for some reason, but one of the most rewatchable, most fun, and just at this point in time, I think we can really just go and say this is one of the most impactful films of this century so far, just because of what the touches this movie did to the superhero genre, and really the crime genre, and just Christopher Nolan's impact on filmmakers. This is really one of the most impactful films of the 21st century. And it's a Batman movie where he's fighting a guy in clown makeup. So just look at that. What do you think of that? So The Dark Knight, truly just one of the best films of all time, and in my eyes, the best Christopher Nolan film and my favorite one as a whole. So thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this video for more content like this, and also comment down below your Christopher Nolan ranking, because I guarantee you no Nolan ranking is going to be like the other, because his movies are just so good that everyone is going to have different preferences. That's what makes Christopher Nolan ranking so interesting. My list, of course, is not the right list, just mine. I'm going to steal that line from Sean Chandler. But thank you all for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed, and tune in for more.